Good morning. Thank you to our media partners for covering this. Again, for your records, it's Sheriff Al Nienhuis. It's spelled Nienhuis, and it's pronounced Nienhuis. And as my public information officer alluded to, this is something that happened almost 2 weeks ago on Sunday, January 29th, and it all occurred right about 8 o'clock in the evening. About 6 or 7 minutes before 8 p.m., we received a call from a third party saying that there may be a domestic occurring on Cobb Road, which is the road actually right out here in front of the sheriff's office, but a few miles north of here. Over the next several minutes, over the next minute or two, a call was generated. And there was some information that we received that there may have been a separate domestic either earlier in the day or within the previous couple days prior to that. But of course, we had no record of that. We were not called on that particular issue. But this third-party caller was relaying that there may be a domestic going on. And it was involving a gentleman, Mr. LeMaster. About 7:55, maybe even closer to 7:56 p.m., we received another call from our victim. And the person and I actually listened to a little bit of that call prior to the press conference today, and that victim was extremely hysterical. There was some discussion of some alcohol involved. Very, very difficult to understand what was going on. The call taker did a great job over the next minute or two trying to figure out that there was some sort of either verbal or physical domestic going on, and the victim was trying to tell us what was going on, but was hyperventilating, hysterical, and as we said, there was some alcohol involved. We actually generated a call for service about that same time, about 5 minutes to 8 o'clock, and at about 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, the victim was stating that she was holding LeMaster down, who was our suspect in this case. He is, here's a photograph of him. He's Tracy Allen LeMaster. He's a white male. He was born June 11th of 1962. And we got information that there may be a gun involved. Again, very hard to figure out exactly what was going on, and that all occurred about 5 or 6 minutes before 8 o'clock. Again, 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, the victim said that she was holding LeMaster down and that she had a hold of his hands and there was a gun in his hands, but she was saying that she was holding him down. Again, caller confirmed that both of them were consuming alcohol, and the call gets disconnected. Of course, at this point, now that we know that a gun is involved, the deputies respond lights and siren and get there within about 4 or 5 minutes of the call. At 8 o'clock, LeMaster is again in possession of the firearm. We get another call, 911 call from the victim, stating he has the gun, and it sounds like the victim is pleading to give her the gun. Deputies are heard in the background instructing LeMaster over this 911 call to drop the gun numerous times, and we'll have some audio of that at the end of this video. LeMaster obviously refuses to comply and is heard at least 5 times in that call, just shoot me, just shoot me. Victim continues pleading with him to give her the gun. At 8:01, the second and third deputy arrives, and a patrol vehicle, which is the video we're going to see, is positioned in such a way that the dash camera records a wide view of what occurred. LeMaster at 8:01 refuses to put the gun down, and as we'll see from the video, and I'm going to tell you on this particular video, we kind of show you the whole video, and then we take a little part of it and we crop it out and we play it over again about 3 or 4 times to kind of show you the furtive movement that was made with the gun. Of course, it's out in a fairly remote area of the county, and it's very dark other than the headlights from the cruisers lighting the area up. But it does appear that he points the weapon at one of the deputies. Shots are fired by the deputies, and of course they are on the ground. LeMaster and the victim are on the ground wrestling, and both LeMaster and this victim get shot. Deputies, of course, request emergency medical assistance immediately. They move in, render life-saving measures. I was told, and I haven't confirmed this, but I was told at least one tourniquet was applied to one of the individuals on the scene, either the victim or the suspect. And of course, over the next several hours, an investigation took place, which included deputies from the Hernando County Sheriff's Office, our forensic team, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and of course the State Attorney's Office. And it's obvious, I think, when you see the picture, when you see the video here, and when you see the video, I think you're going to realize that the deputies were put in a no-win situation, as they often are. We will make this available to you. And again, as I said, this video, after it goes through the full part, it is edited a little bit to give you a little bit closer view. Even the actual video itself has some graphics on it to draw your attention to the point of where the suspect and the victim are wrestling on the ground. He's actually on top. They're not really wrestling. He's on top of her. So this is the deputy pulling up. The house there is the house to the left. And you can see to the right of the shed is where the victim and the suspect are engaged in a physical altercation. You see the deputies now, they know there's a gun involved, and they do not hesitate whatsoever to approach this situation, which is obviously dangerous for everybody involved. Now you'll see a glimmer of the gun here, right there. And here you can see the fluid movement of the gun there. And now we should have some audio of one of the deputies. Hey, drop the gun! Hey, drop the gun! Drop the gun! Drop the gun! Drop the gun now! Drop the gun! Drop the gun! Drop the gun! Drop the gun! Okay, that gives you a little indication of what's going on. Again, if you put yourself in the position of the deputies, they're coming to a situation out in the open. They know there's a gun involved, there's a victim and a suspect. They have a pretty good idea immediately what's going on. There is definitely a gun involved. The deputies not only know that coming up, they can see the gun. And of course, when that gun was pointed in their direction, they really had no other choice but to meet that force with force. I will tell you is both the suspect and the victim survived. The victim was released from the hospital within a couple days, I believe, after the event, and the suspect is still in the hospital, but I heard reports that as of this weekend, that person may be coming to jail. That suspect is being charged with domestic violence, ag assault on law enforcement officers, and several other charges. And again, we're continuing. The investigation is still open. The deputies involved have been interviewed by FDLE, and as is customary, they were put on administrative leave with pay. Within the last day or so, they have been put back to full duty based on getting their interviews accomplished and discussing with FDLE and the State Attorney's Office, seeing no concerns with the outcome of the investigation, or the shooting rather. So with that being said, I probably won't be able to answer a whole lot of questions because technically this is being run by FDLE, and we have been working with them closely along with the State Attorney's Office, but I might be able to answer a couple questions. Also, just for information, the deputies were in the neighborhood of about 25 to 35 feet away from the incident, so they were certainly close enough to be in danger, but they were still a little bit of ways away when the shots rang out. So anybody have any questions that I might be able to
Sheriff, unless I misunderstood, at the beginning I thought you said that the victim was holding LeMaster down, but you're...
Well, that's before we got there. That's what was coming over, being relayed to us by the victim. So that occurred minutes, seconds before we actually arrived. By the time we arrived, the whole situation had reversed.
Even though he had a gun, she was able to...
She was, yeah, and again, I can't illustrate enough how difficult it was to communicate in this case. The victim was even initially when the call first came in, and really I don't even know if there was an indication necessarily that anything physical was going on at that specific moment for the first minute or so. It was kind of hard to tell. She was obviously hyperventilating. She was very difficult to understand. My community relations manager / PIO and I were listening to it, and she spent many years in the comm center, and even she was saying how difficult it was to determine exactly what was going on from the victim. But at some point in that conversation, she was saying she was holding him down and there was a gun, and that's of course when things really ramp up for us. So
how many deputies returned fire and how many
two
shots were there?
two deputies returned fire, and I believe there was a total of about 14 rounds total were fired.
Sheriff, are you able to just say definitively you believe that your deputies acted appropriately?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they were given no other option given the set of circumstances that they were thrown into. And I think if the average person were to watch this video and put themselves in the position of the deputies running into an open field with a person who has said several times, shoot me, and there's obviously a gun involved. The person has apparently lost their will to live and then points the gun at you. I'm very proud of the bravery that they showed and how quickly they went from having to use deadly force to rendering aid, including putting tourniquets on long before fire rescue was able to get on scene, and may have likely saved the life of either the victim or the suspect.
The surveillance or the body cam video in this case, how important is that to
Well, I
your,
think,
investigation to show
yeah.
if there's any question raised that you believe they acted appropriately?
Well, we always got to take what we have available and based on resources, and I think it certainly helps, but I think between the audio of the 911 call and a lot of other things, I think we would have come to the same conclusion. We just may not have had video depending on how, and we all see that based on the angles and so forth. This particular one, because it was a dash cam, it gave us a full view of exactly what happened, and it really removed all doubt, which I think in this case it certainly made it better.
Did LeMaster get any shots off?
No, he did not. We found out later. And of course the deputies had no way of knowing this. The gun was actually out of battery, which is another word for jammed. It was definitely loaded and there were live rounds in there, but apparently in some point in time during the confrontation with the victim, there may have been wrestling, and it was a semi-automatic, and it must have been the slide must have been pulled back so that 2 rounds got jammed in there. Which really was fortunate for the deputies because he might have been able to get a couple rounds off aimed at them before they were able to return fire.
How difficult is it for the deputies?
What's that?
How difficult is it for the deputies knowing that they, because they were, as you said, given no choice to shoot a victim in this case?
I will tell you, we do a tremendous amount in every attempt to give them whatever mental health assistance we can, and I hear several reports that they're doing very, very well. I think they knew that they went into a situation that was extremely dangerous, and they came out unscathed, and the victim is still alive, and actually even the suspect is still alive, which is, ultimately our goal is to come out of this with nobody being injured. And I think they realize that, and again, I think their bravery speaks for itself. So.
Sure. Can you tell me
one at a time, yes, sir.
Relationship between the suspect and the victim and their prior history of domestic violence? You said there might have been one other incident. Did they have other incidents?
I don't think that either the victim or the suspect had been in Florida a tremendous amount of time. I didn't talk about it today, but I remember hearing early on that they may be fairly new. I can't speak too much about the relationship because of Marcy's Law. I want to make sure I don't get anything that could identify the victim. But I will tell you that they were obviously in a relationship where the violence could be considered domestic in nature. And but yeah, I don't think we had any calls related to them previously at all, much less domestic violence. But we do have information that apparently a domestic dispute was going on either earlier that day or the previous day, but fairly recently prior to that, according to this third-party caller.
Have you been able to guarantee that there are no more firearms in that home at this point?
Well, we actually are going through the process of doing a risk protection order with the suspect and making sure that although he is still in custody and will be for the at least foreseeable future, if he does bail out, we're going to do our best to make sure that he does not have access to firearms.
And do you know what they were fighting over that night?
I think that might give information about who the victim was, but suffice it to say it was a very typical domestic type argument. So.
Has there been any communication with the victim? Is she grateful that in this case, or is she ill?
I don't have that information at this point in time. You know, obviously she called us for assistance and there was a gun involved, so we didn't have a whole lot of options in what we could do. But I haven't heard specifically. I know immediately thereafter she was obviously in the hospital and being treated, so it was kind of difficult to communicate. And as I said, alcohol was involved and so forth, but I don't know what's transpired since then. FDLE would probably be better able to answer that, because I think they're the ones that would have interviewed her. So.
Were there any children or other people living there?
I don't believe so. I think they were the only two on the property when deputies arrived.
In your initial report, you said that the deputies were fired upon by the suspect. What caused that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, there was indication, and maybe I need to back up a little bit. Oftentimes, when you're in these situations, you hear people talk about time moving very fast or time moving very slow, and your perceptions get changed. And with the movement of the gun, there was actually a deputy, I believe we hear on the radio, where the deputy legitimately thought that he was fired upon based on maybe the gun was clicking, maybe the person was trying to pull the trigger, but the deputy actually immediately after the shots were fired was saying he shot at me, if I remember correctly. So the deputies actually thought they were fired upon, and of course it takes us a very long time to go through and do round counts on the deputies, do round counts on the suspect gun, and because we don't go right up immediately and start opening the gun up and looking at it. It's evidence, and it takes a while for us and FDLE to go through that, and we come to find out that the amount the gun could hold and the amount it had when it was seized were the same. So it was fully loaded, so it could not have fired. But there was out of battery, and there were 2 live rounds in the chamber area of the semi-automatic. So that's why we initially thought, and that's why we always say, and even to this day, we may find out more information as the investigation goes, and it's been almost 2 weeks, but certainly within a day or two, everything is subject to change based on the information we get. So.
Is this audio that you have, is that from a body cam or from the
That's actually from, yeah, that's from the microphone that connects to a different deputy's in-car camera.
Okay. So was that on the whole time?
Yes, and I think the 911 call also has most of the information on it, because the victim, the line was open for most of the event. I think there was a disconnection and then reconnected, and that was probably around the time she was holding him down and then got disconnected, and then the things changed.
Are you able to release any of the 911 calls?
We're going to work on that. We would have to redact it, and we'd have to talk with FDLE and make sure, because again, it's their investigation. We talked with them about this, and I don't think they'd have a problem with that, but we're going to have to redact any identifiers out of it that might identify the victim. So, any other questions? All right, thank you all very much for coming. Of course, our PIO is always available. If you have any follow-up, feel free to have your desk or your editors give us a call. All right, thank you all very much.